during the interview that I had with Naledi, Rudy Dix, the director at Naledi. He asked this question. Peter, if you don't mind asking this, or Minister, if you're listening, you can, I suppose, answer this one directly. Do we have the correct economic framework to actually achieve this? The current framework is very conservative, he feels, similar to that in 1996. Can we achieve this in the current framework that we're working in? This is a question that we were asked from Rudy Dix at Naledi.
All right, Minister, did you hear that question? Didn't hear anything. All right, Leanne, can you just say that question again and I'll relay it to the Minister because we're having difficulty hearing you.
All right, no problem. Just to relay it once again, do we have the current economic framework to achieve the goals that have been laid out? The current frame is very conservative, very much so, similar to 1996. Can we achieve it with the current economic framework? That really is the question.
The economic framework tabled in 1996 was a macroeconomic framework. Let me just say that I've worked at this in a number of different initiatives across the world. There is no country that has grown sustainably in an environment of macroeconomic instability. If you can't control government finances, if you can't control inflation, if you don't have a handle on the balance of payments, you can't take decisions. Don't ask me, ask George Papandreou, the former Prime Minister of Greece. And it may be conservative, but there's no country in the world, not China, not India, there's no country in the world that is growing sustainably by allowing macroeconomic conditions to spin out of control. But having said that, what happens then are a series of microeconomic reforms that must focus on employment, on competitiveness, on creating space for small and medium enterprises, and a range of other areas. So I think that the framework is there. If you examine the very detailed chapter on employment and the economy, it mirrors largely the same kinds of issues articulated in the new growth path. The growth numbers, the employment numbers are similar, so I don't think there's any concern about that.
Vuyo, you have a question from one of our viewers?
Yeah.
Yes, we do, Peter. The question is from Judy Stevens of Newlands in Cape Town. She says, I'm a 62-year-old white grandmother. I'm an ex-teacher. I love this country, want it to work for all its citizens. I'm alarmed and angry at how many of my privileged friends whinge about everything and anything. Do you, Minister, have a suggestion as to how South Africans of my age, Judy is 62, can play a part, however small, in making this a fairer place? Judy Stevens in Newlands, Cape Town. Did you get that, Peter?
I did, Vuyo. I sometimes spend time in Newlands, Cape Town. Ask the producer to get Judy's number. She and I will go door to door and change the behavior of her friends in Newlands. We can do this stuff. We have to believe in our capability. We saw in the early 90s Madiba go door to door in Houghton, and I think, Judy, we have to do the same in Newlands. We have to say to people there is actually no alternative but to be involved in everything that happens in South Africa. We have to close the gap. We have to ensure that every South African has the capabilities to be involved in their own lives. Good question. Thanks. I'll follow up on that.
Minister, how do we motivate the haves? Because the status quo suits them quite well. They're driving nice cars, living in really nice houses. Why should they get behind this plan?
I think that there's a big message that speaks not from South Africa, but that speaks from other parts of the world. This morning, very early on CNN, they had a millionaire who flew into Washington, D.C. first to go and persuade government, especially the Republicans, that a tax increase is necessary to provide services in the country. He went from there to walk alongside the Occupy Wall Street protesters to say to them, I'm part of the 1%, but your issues should become my issues. Now, it signaled this guy isn't off his trolley. He's very rational. He's accumulated a lot of money. But he's saying that in his interests, peace in the United States is an important criterion so that he can live well. And I think we need to do the same thing in South Africa. It's preventing the shut out. It's preventing, because merely going home, turning on the electrified fence and the alarm, downloading movies so that you don't even have to step out to a movie store, and staying indoors is no life. We need to transform what happens in this country, and it's an all-in effort. I think it's demonstrating how we need to rebuild trust. What the generation of privileged South Africans must understand is that it's the same generation that in the late 80s had the choice. We either faced each other across the battle of a gun, or we did what was necessary. This is a similar kind of moment, and I think this moment is informed not by a tipping point reached yet in South Africa, but a tipping point that can be prevented because we can see and we all have access to the communications and media that tell us about what's happening in the rest of the world. There actually is no choice but to be involved. And this process hopefully will invite people. In the same way as Julie Stevens comes out and says, well, let's talk to our neighbors. It's fundamentally important that privileged South Africans understand that it's in their interest and the interest of their children that we do this thing quite differently.
All right, well, let's find out what our audience here are interested in. Let's begin, I think, at table 2. Swanele Radebe, where are you? Table number 2, if I could ask you to stand up. He's the New Age business editor. And if I could ask you to ask your question and be as brief as possible.
It will be safe to assume that this plan comes at a time of heightened political and ideological bickering in our country. And you can rest assured that this situation is going to get worse as we head towards Mangaung. The question is, how are you going to navigate this poisoned political environment to ensure this plane does not gather dust and die?
I didn't hear the question.
So, do you want to speak louder?
How are you going to ensure that this plane does not gather dust and die as a result of heightened political and ideological bickering that is taking place in our country right now, which is going to get worse, as we know, as we headed towards Mangaung?
You know, Mr. Radebe, if that were your approach in life, then don't be a journalist. Don't be married. Don't be in any relationship. Don't have any friends. Lock yourself up in a dark room. Because every relationship has to be worked at. If we don't take that view of life, there's no point in living. Relationships must be worked at. And if every time somebody has a different opinion, we run away from it, then there's no point in being in positions of decision making. It doesn't matter whether you are managing a branch of a store, the chief executive of a company, but clearly there can't be any place for you in government if the only people you talk to are people who agree with you. Life would be incredibly boring.
All right, so let's go to table number 36. Johan Smith, if you could stand up. Johan Smith, where are you? Where's table number 36? There's Johan Smith over there. Please ask your question as briefly as possible.
Morning, Mr. Minister. Excellent plan.
Can I ask you to speak up as well?
Excellent plan. Does the ANC have the political will to execute on it and implement it? For example, you talk about education. What are we going to do about the unions in the school?
Let me start off by saying that the President was abundantly clear when he set the National Planning Commission on its way, that we aren't a creature of the ruling party. There are members of the Planning Commission who I know aren't members of the ANC, and there are some members of the Planning Commission who I know are members of other political parties. But the issue has never arisen, because this is not a party political matter. It's a matter that affects all of our South Africans. The Constitution is not a party political issue. The values of the Constitution are not party political matters. In fact, when I spoke to the President last week, he said, you know, between now and 2030, there are 4 general elections. We need to have this plan about the issues that all of us as South Africans agree on. Education, jobs, rural development, competent public service, etc. are issues that we should all agree on. But in agreeing on those issues and developing a plan to deal with it, in no way does this limit the ability of any political party to formulate its own election manifesto, but all driven in exactly the same direction. Jobs is not a party political issue. Education isn't. And it's in turning around the head of South Africans and saying, you matter regardless of who you voted for in the last election or who you intend voting for in the next election. What matters is your involvement in effecting change in this country. I think that every member of the National Planning Commission would agree with me, and I know that I can speak with the authority of the President in this matter because he's very clear that whilst there are party political issues, there are actually bigger issues that should involve all of us. And as we proceed, we will persuade each other along the line of party political preferences. But there are some issues that we should take out of the debate between political parties. Thanks.
All right, let's go to table 35. Pete Krookamp, is Pete Krookamp there? Table 35, you have a question?
Yeah. Good morning. I think the answer about, or the question about the unions, to what extent have you involved COSATU and the unions in the formulation of this plan? And secondly, it might be necessary to change legislation, specifically labor legislation, or enact new legislation to make this plan work. How do you see the time frame for all these things working?
The Commission is broadly representative of South African interests, but not representative of particular groups. So there's nobody in the Commission who would say, I'm here to represent the interests of COSATU, and another person saying, I'm here to represent the interests of Solidarity. The Commission has approached this matter taking a very broad pan of how we need to proceed. We've tested the ideas. Some of the ideas are pretty sensitive ideas. For instance, when the Commission says, as we do, that public servants must be immersed in development but insulated from political interference, what do we mean? It has a very distinct meaning. We don't expect people other than public servants to be involved in development. So teachers mustn't say, our job is not to teach, our position in life is to be employed. No, we must say to them, your responsibility is to transmit skills, and if you have a difficulty in your own understanding, allow us on the one hand to test it, and we will assist to ensure that you are placed in that position of trust where you can transmit knowledge and facilitate the learning by our children. Now, some unions may not like that approach. Some unions may not like the fact that the Commission would like to see teachers in class on time, teaching for as many hours a day as they are required to do and to prepare for the time in class. But you've got to take this issue in national interest. Now, in respect of labor legislation, there are a few proposals in the plan. One of these is to take people who earn more than 300,000 a year out of the provisions of the CCMA so that you can try and unclutter the work of the CCMA. The second is to make it easier for employers to dismiss in circumstances of misconduct. And we had a point in this country where no union would defend a worker for misconduct, especially where the misconduct was related to issues of dishonesty. That has disappeared. The proposal is to try and bring it back into play. And there's a proposal for probation to be exactly that, so that employers can take somebody, try them out, test the attitude, check the responses, and then be able to decide within the first year. These are three fairly firm proposals. There's also a proposal that deals with the transition from a learning institution to work, both school and FET or higher education. Frequently, people may have the technical knowledge but not the life skills to be able to transit, and there are proposals that there be additional inputs in the bridging to ensure that people are better prepared to deal with work. These are firm proposals. The Commission will stand by it. And what's important, Peter, is that we are able to convince all South Africans, including unionized workers, that it's in our collective best interest to maximize the number of South Africans who work. Thanks.
Right, you talk about South Africans who work, and of course they're going to be working for businesses. There's a startup business has got a question for you. Thurston Sibutsane is table 34. Where are you, Thurston? Please ask your question of the Minister. Again, be as brief as possible.
Thank you, Minister. At least there is a plan. Now I'm saying to you as a challenge, like the lady from Newlands who wants to do door-to-door with you, how do we then engage with your department, with you, so that we can help you make sure that the plan then succeeds? Thank you.
Thurston, the National Planning Commission is not a government department. We have 26 commissioners, 25. I don't quite know what the part means, but they have jobs other than being commissioners. And we have a very small secretariat. Our job is to now get the ideas out, to get South Africa to understand what the plan is. I'm saying that we should be able to develop a knowledge base of what the 100 or so actionable steps are, what the targets are, and to get government departments, provinces and local government to account for the implementation. So we need I suppose in the short term, people who will go out with us and soldier on and persuade other people to get involved in the process of understanding the plan and then sharing with us their ideas on the proposals that we've put into the public domain. That's the first and very important step. We're trying to do the step at an odd time of the year. And a fortnight from now, we'll be in COP17 in Durban. Some of us will then stay in Durban and soak up the sun on the beach. And then we'll go to Bloemfontein for some events in January, and then we go to Parliament for the opening of Parliament and the budget. But notwithstanding that, the work of propagating the ideas of the plan must continue throughout all of it. So Thurston, you and I, 24th of December to the 31st of December, let's do this together, I think somewhere in Bolito or on the beach.
Minister, earlier on I spoke to Bernadette Simon. She's with QOS Consulting, and she said, Dear Minister, I fully support your 11 million jobs by 2030. My concern, though, is with school leavers. Can we look at a one-year learnership where children get to work in different sectors of the economy under the auspices of the SETAs? They get valuable experience in the process, write what they've learned or experienced, and also at the end of the process perhaps get a graduation ceremony promoting patriotism, she says.
Well, you know, we have to do everything in our power to try. I want to point out that the 11 million jobs is not a promise. It's a need identified. It's a need identified because if we don't deal with unemployment in general, youth unemployment in particular, I think we'll place democracy at risk. And so a series of questions, a number of proposals about which sectors we should get people into. But I think that if we look back on the past 15 years or so, we also need to be critical of what has happened with learnerships. I've met so many young people, especially in the past 18 months, who have been through 5 or 6 learnerships and feel quite frustrated as a consequence. We opted, incorrectly in my view, to replace apprenticeships with learnerships, and now we don't have a cadre of artisans who can actually make the difference. You're seeing this between people who've come out of learnerships, 12-month learnerships, and people elsewhere in the world who undergo 3 or 4 year apprenticeships. We need apprentices. We need to create that cadre of artisans. What we're seeing at Medupi, where a power station, a construction site, where we've had to bring in coated pipe welders from Thailand, is not a sustainable issue. We aren't talking of people who need to put satellites in space and therefore need high levels of physics. We're talking of artisanal skills that can and should be learnt, and the country hasn't trained people in these areas. That is a tragedy. It's a collective tragedy. It's not a governmental issue. It's something that must speak to the conscience of all of us so that we can produce that very important cadre, because without that, you'll have continuing deindustrialization in a country such as ours. And that is the big change that needs to become. So, needs to come through. I mean, in agreeing with Bernadette, I think that it's the learnerships, but not chopping and changing. People must emerge with a definable set of skills at the conclusion of a learnership, but also we must reintroduce apprenticeships, because that is for many people a route out of poverty.
All right, so we're going to take another quick break. We're talking to the Minister in the Presidency, Trevor Manuel, about the National Planning, National Development Plan 2030, and we'll continue to engage with him and ask him questions right after this break.